It's Bible Hour, ladies and gentlemen, and it's day 110. And if you want to know what book that we're approaching, then name this tune. Daniel was traveling tonight on a plane. I could see red taillights, here it is, Spain. Oh, I could see Daniel waving goodbye. Oh, it looks like Daniel. Do. Must be the clouds in my eye. Oh, Daniel. Ooh, ooh, you are my brother. Do you still feel pain? The clouds in my eyes. Oh, Daniel, it's so high. Ladies and gentlemen, we are hot on the heels of one of the most famous books in world literature, one of the most Jesus-centered books in the whole of the ancient scriptures. Welcome on into the Bible Hour as we finish off the book of Ezekiel. Ricky B, that's such a beautiful photo of you in the thumbnail. If anyone asks what made Rita fall for you, just show them that picture. It's a beautiful thing. Good evening, Parker and Admin. I know who that is. That's Neil. Good evening, Sam Whittington. Good evening, Chloe and Fion. That was Elton John, by the way. Ooh, it's going to be an exciting night tonight. I can feel it. Welcome on in, Sue Roberts' house, Timmy. I'll tell you this. Evie the doggy was in the vet today because she has a urine infection. And there were indeed white blood cells traced in the urine sample that Rita ascertained with a Tupperware box, which was not easy. You knows it, Ricky B. Diane Robbins in the house. Timmy healing nicely and eating well, but he doesn't like me? What? I don't believe it. Ooh, I can see Daniel waving goodbye. Oh, I miss Daniel. Oh, I miss him so much. Oh, Daniel, my brother, you are older than me. Do you still feel the pain of the scars that won't heal? Your eyes have died, but I see more than I. Daniel, you're a star. A key change there for the last line. Who'd have thought? I wasn't expecting it. Sam Whitted and the girls joining with Hot Chocolate and Galaxy for one of the most famous books ever written. Although we're not actually there yet. Poor Evie, that's rotten. Timmy wasn't drinking, so I put grated cheese in a bowl of water. Then he drank it to get at the cheese. Oh, that's funny. Alright, Parker and Abby, where are we in the Bible at the moment? Does anybody know? I think we got to verse 38 of some sort of chapter 40, I think. Park End admin laying it on thick, attacking the minister. Ezekiel 40, chapter 38. Diane, would you be so kind as to do gate duty tomorrow night, or is that something that you would rather not do every single week and just occasionally, and I'll go and do it just before the Bible hour? Ladies and gentlemen, do not forget that it's car park communion this weekend, and if you are one of the people who have volunteered to help, if you could make it there for this weekend and you can see the operation in operation and then join the operation to further the operation, that would be great. But before we get to Daniel, boy oh boy have we got some exciting chapters left. I preferred Hurst Neal. Thank you, Diane. Thank you. Let's get this mic a bit closer. I'm not sure you could hear my singing loud enough. Owen, I am close to the gate and I can go down. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, so Diane, if you want to ask Sue, all I would like is the gate to just be closed on Friday evening so we can keep out cars on the Saturday for that little slot. And if there's cars in there, well, they can just open it when they exit the next day. Chris Henry, it all happens before you arrive. Ricky B, I suggest letting potential spammers know that they will be blocked. Are you referring to Chris Henry and Diane? Sue Roberts, thank you, Ricky B, for something. Who knows what? Ladies and gentlemen, I think that at about the halfway mark, we are going to transition into one of the most famous Bible books or world books ever written. And that's all I got to say about that. In 2 minutes' time, we will be beginning at verse 38 of Ezekiel 40. The Lord just wants his church to be back in order, and so he's giving them a vision of this temple. Sue Roberts, what planet is Owen on? Park End planet. Now, I've just joined you in your planet sphere from the planet of the valleys. Welcome on in if you're new to Bible Hour. Every day What's it doing all the way back there? I think Rita moves it every single day, because I don't move it back. Every day we ask, what do we learn about Jesus in church? The most important questions. Petty Bar in the house, evening all. Alright. Now we can start Petty Bars here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ezekiel chapter 40 verse 38. Big things are happening at the end of this book. Promises of hope. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So there is a man leading Ezekiel through a better temple. A door led from the entry room of one of the inner gateways into a side room where the meat for sacrifices was washed. On each side of this entry room were 2 tables, where the sacrificial animals were slaughtered for the burnt offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings. Outside the entry room, on each side of the stairs going up to the north entrance, were 2 more tables. So there were 8 tables in all, 4 inside and 4 outside, where the sacrifices were cut up and prepared. There were also 4 tables of finished stone for preparation of the burnt offering, each 31.5 inches square and 21 inches high. On these tables were placed the butchering knives and other implements for slaughtering the sacrificial animals. There were hooks, each 3 inches long, fastened all around the foyer walls. The sacrificial meat was laid on the tables. Room for the priests, obviously. Inside the inner courtyard were 2 rooms, one beside the north gateway facing south and the other beside the south gateway facing north. And the man said to me, "The room beside the north inner gate is for the priests who supervise the temple maintenance. The room beside the south inner gate is for the priests in charge of the altar, the descendants of Zadok. For they alone of all the Levites may approach the Lord to minister to him." The inner courtyard and temple. Then the man measured the inner courtyard, and it was a square 175 feet wide and 175 feet across. The altar stood in the courtyard in front of the temple. Then he brought me to the entry room of the temple. He measured the walls on either side of the opening to the entry room, and they were 8 3/4 feet thick. The entrance itself was 24.5 feet wide, and the walls on each side of the entrance were an additional 5 1/4 feet long. The entry room was 35 feet wide, 21 feet deep. There were 10 steps leading up to it, with a column on each side. Big things. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached Ezekiel 41. After that, the man brought me into the sanctuary of the temple. He measured the walls on either side of its doorway, and they were 10.5 feet thick. The doorway was 17.5 feet wide, and the walls on each side of it were 8 3/4 feet long. The sanctuary itself was 70 feet long and 35 feet wide. Then he went beyond the sanctuary into the inner room. He measured the walls on either side of his entrance, and they were 3.5 feet thick. The entrance was 10.5 feet wide, and the walls on each side of the entrance were 12 1/4 feet long. The inner room of the sanctuary was 35 feet long and 35 feet wide. This, he told me, is the most holy place. Then he measured the wall of the temple, and it was 10.5 feet thick. There was a row of rooms along the outside wall. Each room was 7 feet wide. These side rooms were built in 3 levels, one above the other, with 30 rooms on each level. The supports for these side rooms rested on interior ledges on the temple wall. They did not extend into the wall. Each level was wider than the one below it, corresponding to the narrowing of the temple wall as it rose higher. A stairway led up from bottom level through the middle level to the top level. I saw that the temple was built on a terrace, which provided a foundation for the side rooms. The terrace was 10.5 feet high. The outer wall of the temple side rooms were 8 3/4 feet thick. This left an open area between these side rooms and a row of rooms along the outer wall of the inner courtyard. This open area was 35 feet wide, and it went all the way around the temple. 2 doors opened from the side rooms into the terrace yard, which was 8 3/4 feet wide. 1 door faced north and the other south. A large building stood on the west, facing the temple courtyard. It was 122.5 feet wide and 157.5 feet long, and its walls were 8.75 feet thick. Then the man measured the temple, and it was 175 feet long. The courtyard around the building, including its walls, was an additional 175 feet in length. The inner courtyard to the east temple was also 175 feet wide. The building to the west, including its two walls, was also 175 feet wide. Now, don't look over this, because if you're a church that's been in Babylonian captivity, you are listening to this with eyes wide open. For what it's worth, I actually think Park End's sanctuary is my favourite sanctuary in Cardiff in terms of the colours and the structure and the layout. I just love it. I love the stained glass window. I love the red carpets. The sanctuary and the inner room and the entry room of the temple were all panelled with wood and were the frames of the recessed windows. The inner walls of the temple were panelled with wood above and below the windows. The space above the door leading into the inner room and its walls inside and out were also panelled. All the walls were decorated with carvings of cherubim, each with two faces, and there was a carving of a palm tree between each of the cherubim. One face, that of a man, looked toward the palm tree on one side. The other face, that of a young lion, looked toward the palm tree on the other side. The figures were carved all along the inside of the temple, from the floor to the top of the walls, including the wall of the sanctuary. There were square columns at the entrance to the sanctuary, and the ones at the entrance of the most holy place were similar. There was an altar made of wood, 5.25 feet high and 3.5 feet across. Its corners, base and sides were all made of wood. This, the man told me, is the table that stands in the Lord's presence. Both the sanctuary and the most holy place had double doorways, each with two swinging doors. The doors leading into the sanctuary were decorated with carved cherubim and palm trees, just as on the walls. And there was a wooden roof at the front of the entry room to the temple. On both sides of the entry room were recessed windows decorated with carved palm trees. The side rooms along the outside wall also had roofs. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ezekiel chapter 42. Rooms for the priests. Then we're going to take a pause after the 44th chapter, and then we're going to check out Daniel. Then the man led me out of the temple courtyard by the way of the north gateway. We entered the outer courtyard and came to a group of rooms against the north wall of the inner courtyard. This structure, whose entrance opened toward the north, was 175 feet long and 87.5 feet wide. One block of rooms overlooked the 35-foot width of the inner courtyard. Another block of rooms looked out onto the pavement of the outer courtyard. The two blocks were built 3 levels high and stood across from each other. Between the two blocks of rooms ran a walkway 17.5 feet wide. It extended the entire 175 feet of the complex, and all the doors faced north. Would the PCW grant us money to rebuild the temple at the Park End location? That would be awesome. I think they should. Since there were 3 levels and they did not have supporting columns as in the courtyards, each of the upper levels was set back from the level beneath it. My Bible has 48 chapters in Ezekiel. Are you using some Orthodox version that has only 44? Let's check it out. Okay. Yeah, okay, I see the problem. I see the problem. Yeah, I see what's happened here. What's happened here is I can't even wriggle my way out of this one by saying the Orthodox has 44, and that's my authority here. I think we will chalk that up to an error on behalf of Owen. There are 48 chapters, ladies and gentlemen. We will not be starting Daniel after the 44th. That is why Ricky B is an elder. There was an outer wall that separated the rooms from the outer courtyard. It was 87.5 feet long. This wall added length to the outer block of rooms, which extended for only 87.5 feet, while the inner block, the rooms toward the temple, extended for 175 feet. NLT has 48. Mine has 48. Mine has 4. All right, Bible Hour. You're always rubbing salt in the wounds. We're not going to reach Daniel tonight. What? Sue Roberts, you insult me. I could talk about Islam or something for 10 minutes and then read it, and we'd still get to Daniel. Do you just have to be able to count to be an elder? On the south side of the temple, there were 2 blocks of rooms just south of the inner courtyard between the temple and the outer courtyard. These rooms were arranged just like the rooms on the north. There was a walkway between the 2 blocks of rooms, just like the complex on the north side of the temple. This complex of rooms was the same length and width as the other one, and it had the same entrances and doors. The dimensions of each were identical. So there was an entrance in the wall facing the doors of the inner block of rooms, and another on the east end of the interior walkway. Now remember why they're bothering to go through all this. Because church is the hope of the world, and to have the temple back where the Lord lives is going to be world changing. So it's like, stick some chapters in about it. To be an elder, you have to have a spouse who prompts you to say the right things. Yeah. All right, I'm getting on it, man. Then the man told me, these rooms that overlook the temple from the north and south are holy. Here the priests who offer sacrifices to the Lord will eat the most holy offerings. And because these rooms are holy, they will be used to store the sacred offerings, the grain offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings. When the priests leave the sanctuary, they must not go directly to the outer courtyard. They must first take off the clothes they wore while ministering, because these clothes are holy. They must put on other clothes before entering the parts of the building complex open to the public. Wow. That's just what I read from the Welsh government today. When the man had finished measuring the inside of the temple area, he led me out through the east gateway to measure the entire perimeter. He measured the east side with his measuring rod, and it was 875 feet long. Then he measured the north side. It was also 875 feet. The south side, 875 feet. And the west side, 875 feet. So the area was 875 feet on each side, with a wall around it to separate what was holy from what was coming. Ezekiel chapter 43. The Lord's glory returns. After this, the man brought me back around to the east gateway. Suddenly, the glory of the God of Israel appeared from the east. The sound of his coming was like the roar of rushing waters, and the whole landscape shone with his glory. The vision was just like the others I had seen, first by the Kebar River, and then when he came to destroy Jerusalem. I fell face down on the ground. And the glory of the Lord came into the temple through the east gateway. Then the Spirit took me up and brought me into the inner courtyard, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. And I heard someone speaking to me from within the temple, while the man who had been measuring stood beside me. The Lord said to me, Son of man, this is the place of my throne, and the place where I will rest my feet. I will live here forever among the people of Israel. They and their kings will not defile my holy name any longer by their adulterous worship of other gods, or by honouring the relics of their kings who have died. They put their idol altars right next to mine, with only a wall between them and me. They defiled my holy name by such detestable sin, so I consumed them in my anger. Now let them stop worshipping other gods and honouring the relics of their kings, and I will live among them forever. Son of man, describe to the people of Israel the temple I have shown you, so they will be ashamed of all their sins. Let them study its plan, and they will be ashamed of what they have done. Describe to them the specifications of the temple, including its entrances and exits, and everything else about it. Tell them about its decrees and laws. Write down all these specifications and decrees as they watch, so they will be sure to remember and follow them. And this is the basic law of the temple: absolute holiness. The entire top of the mountain where the temple is built is holy. Yes, this is the basic law of the temple. The altar. These are the measurements of the altar. There is a gutter all around the altar, 21 inches deep and 21 inches wide, with a curb 9 inches wide around its edge. And this is the height of the altar. From the gutter, the altar rises 3.5 feet to a lower ledge that surrounds the altar and is 21 inches wide. From the lower edge, the altar rises 7 feet to the upper ledge that is also 21 inches wide. To the top of the altar, the hearth, rises another 7 feet higher, with a horn rising up from each of the 4 corners. The top of the altar is square, measuring 21 feet by 21 feet. The upper ledge also forms a square, measuring 24.5 feet by 24.5 feet, with 21-inch gutter and a 10.5-inch curb all around the edge. There are steps going up the east side of the altar. Then he said to me, Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says. These will be the regulations for the burnt offerings and the sprinkling of blood when the altar is built. At that time, the Levitical priests of the family of Zadok, who minister before me, are to be giving a young bull for a sin offering, says the sovereign Lord. Nick Hawkins in the house, or a husband that corrects you. I was trying to be non-gender specific. Man, I forgot what we were talking about way back then. Ricky B, did I read somewhere that the temple was built where Abraham was to offer Isaac as a sacrifice, or did I just dream it? Yes, you did read that, is the short answer. Yeah, you did read that, yeah. Man, I forgot what verse I'm on. Parking, I mean, what verse am I on? Yeah, they're just... I lost my verse because I pressed the wrong button. The problem is, Parker... Oh, 20, thanks. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Park End admin Chris Henry. What happened is I clicked on the chat and then I went backwards in the book and... Okay, you will take some of its blood and smear it on the four horns of the altar and the four corners of the upper ledge and the curb that runs around that ledge. 20, 20, 20. Alright, I got it. This will cleanse and make atonement for the altar. Then the young bull for the sin offering. Then take the young bull for the sin offering and burn it on the appointed place outside the temple area. Yeah, so all this is Mount Moriah. It's very close to Mount Calvary. It's very close to that fortified... yeah, we don't need to get into the fortified stuff, but yeah, it's all that area. And I think the western wall is the only thing left now, isn't it, of that whole area. On the second day, sacrifice as a sin offering a young male goat that has no physical defects. Then cleanse and make atonement for the altar again, just as you did with the young bull. When you have finished the cleansing ceremony, offer another young bull that has no defects and a perfect ram from the flock. You are to present them to the Lord, and the priests are to sprinkle salt on them and offer them as a burnt offering to the Lord. Every day for 7 days a male goat, a young bull, and a ram from the flock will be sacrificed as a sin offering. None of these animals may have physical defects of any other kind. Remember the whole physical defects thing, why it, and what it was a picture of, and why it was a hope for those of us with physical defects and bad backs, and Timmy who's had a mouth operation. Then go back to the Leviticus and Exodus Bible Hour studies. It's up there forever in the ether. Do this each day for 7 days to cleanse and make atonement for the altar, thus setting it apart for holy use. And that's, by the way, why the priests in their sham trial of Jesus could find no fault in him, nor could Pilate, because the lamb always had to be without blemish and spot. Because the Muslims believe the story of Abraham going to sacrifice Ishmael, the child of Hagar, his handmaid, so that is why the site is sacred to them. Yeah, and they've got that wrong on multiple accounts, because it's not Ishmael, and it doesn't say that in our text, and it actually doesn't say that in their text, but that's another study altogether. Do this each day for 7 days to cleanse and make atonement for the altar, thus setting it apart for holy use. On the 8th day, and on each day afterward, the priest will sacrifice on the altar the burnt offerings and peace offerings of the people. Then I will accept you. I, the sovereign Lord, have spoken. Ezekiel chapter 44. The prince, Levites, and priests. Then the man brought me back to the east gateway in the outer wall of the temple area, but it was closed. And the Lord said to me, this gate must remain closed. It will never again be opened. No one will ever open it and pass through, for the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered here. Therefore, it must always remain shut. Only the prince himself may sit inside this gateway to feast in the Lord's presence, but he may come and go only through the entry room of the gateway. Then the man brought me through the north gateway to the front of the temple. I looked and saw that the glory of the Lord filled the temple of the Lord, and I fell face down on the ground. And the Lord said to me, Son of man, take careful notice. Use your eyes and ears and listen to everything I tell you about the regulations concerning the Lord's temple. Take careful note of the procedures for using the temple's entrances and exits. It's just like now. And give these rebels, the people of Israel, this message from the sovereign Lord. O people of Israel, enough of your detestable sins. You have brought uncircumcised foreigners into my sanctuary, people who have no heart for God. In this way you defiled my temple, even as you offered me my food, the fat of blood and of sacrifices. In addition to all your other detestable sins, you have broken my covenant. Instead of safeguarding my sacred rituals, you have hired foreigners to take charge of my sanctuary. Did they have a one-way system? Yes, they did, 2 meters apart, and sanitizing tables everywhere. So this is what the sovereign Lord says: no foreigners, including those who live among the people of Israel, will enter my sanctuary if they have not been circumcised and have not surrendered themselves to the Lord. And the men of the tribe of Levi who abandoned me when Israel strayed away from me to worship idols must bear the consequences of their unfaithfulness. They may still be temple guards and gatekeepers, and they may slaughter the animals brought for burnt offerings and be present to help the people. But they encouraged my people to worship idols, causing Israel to fall into deep sin. So I have taken a solemn oath that they must bear the consequences for their sins, says the sovereign Lord. They may not approach me to minister as priests. They may not touch any of my holy things or the holy offerings, for they must bear the shame of all the detestable sins they have committed. They are to serve as the temple caretakers, taking charge of the maintenance work and performing general duties. However, the Levitical priests of the family of Zadok continued to minister faithfully in the temple when Israel abandoned me for idols. That must have been tough. It is not easy standing for Jesus in a religious climate that hates him. They will stand in my presence and offer the fat and blood of the sacrifices, says the sovereign Lord. They alone will enter my sanctuary and approach my table to serve me. They will fulfill all my requirements. When they enter the gateway to the inner courtyard, they must wear only linen clothing. They must wear no wool while on duty in the inner courtyard or in the temple itself. They must wear linen turbans and linen undergarments. They must not wear anything that would cause them to perspire. When they return to the outer courtyard where the people are, they must take off the clothes they wear while ministering to me. They must leave them in the sacred rooms and put on the other clothes so they do not endanger anyone by transmitting holiness to them through this clothing. They must neither shave their heads nor let their hair grow too long. Instead, they must trim it regularly. The priests must not drink wine before entering the inner courtyard. They may choose their wives only from among the virgins of Israel or the widows of priests. They may not marry other widows or divorced women. They will teach my people the difference between what is holy and what is common, what is ceremonially clean and unclean. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going back to the glory days of Moses. They will serve as judges to resolve any disagreements among my people. Their decisions must be based on my regulations, and the priests themselves must obey my instructions and decrees at all the sacred festivals, and see to it that the Sabbaths are set apart again as holy days. A priest must not defile himself by being in the presence of a dead person unless it is his father, mother, child, brother, or unmarried sister. In such cases it is permitted. Even then, he can return to his temple duties only after being ceremonially cleansed and then waiting for 7 days. The first day he returns to work and enters the inner courtyard of the sanctuary, he must offer a sin offering for himself, says the sovereign Lord. The priests will not have any property or possession of land, for I alone am their special possession. Their food will come from the gifts and sacrifices brought to the temple by the people, the grain offerings, the sin offerings, the guilt offerings. Whatever anyone sets apart for the Lord will belong to the priests. The first of the ripe fruits and all the gifts brought to the Lord will go to the priests. The first batch of dough must also be given to the priests, so the Lord will bless your homes. The priests may not eat meat from any bird or animal that dies a natural death or that dies after being attacked by another animal. And Bible Hour know why through and through, because we love Moses and we understand the ancient church life and why it was a display of heaven on earth. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the halfway mark. Take 110 seconds and then strap on your seatbelts, because we are demolishing Ezekiel and then starting Daniel. Now let me just check something. Let me check that. No, not that. Let me just check that. No, not that. Not that. Let me check this. Don't want to check that. I'll be with you back in a minute. No, not that. Not that. And not that. Not that. Right, let's just click that. And then scroll down to that. And then... hold on. Right, hold on. Now then, I have got something to say here. Okay, I found it. I knew I had notes on this. So, if you do ever come across... here's why it's important to maintain that it was Isaac, not Ishmael, who was to be sacrificed on this mountain that the table is on now. First of all, the only boy Abraham had at the time was Isaac. Ishmael, no, right, it was Isaac who was sacrificed and not Ishmael for at least 4 reasons. The only boy Abraham had at the time. Ishmael was 14 when Isaac was born. Hagar and Ishmael were sent away to a different place the day Isaac was weaned in Genesis 21. Ishmael was long gone when Abraham was tested in Genesis 21. Next, Isaac is the only heir, and only son also means beloved son. So while the culture of the time accepted taking concubines for procreation, inheritance and the right of the firstborn would go to sons of actual wives, not the sons of concubines. So he was the heir, which has theological importance. He's also the only son of promise. Genesis 21:12 says, "Through Isaac your offspring shall be reckoned." Abraham had other sons too, but they were born after this. Even, and this is the point I tried to say earlier, I knew it was in my head, even the Quran does not say it was Ishmael. Genesis 22:2 says it was Isaac. For Muslims, while the Muslim Quran discusses this in Surah 37, nowhere in the entire Quran does it say whether it was Ishmael or Isaac. In fact, many early Islamic scholars disagreed, some saying it was Isaac, while others said it was it was Ishmael. 16 Muslims of authority said it was Isaac, while 23 said it was Ishmael. That was just by the by. I knew it came up. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on back. Well, we are into... I clicked a button again. Ezekiel chapter 45, the division of the land. When you divide the land among the tribes of Israel, you must set aside a section for the Lord as his holy portion. This piece of land will be 8 1/3 miles long and 6 2/3 miles wide. The entire area will be holy. A section of this land measuring 875 feet by 875 feet will be set aside for the temple. An additional strip of land, 87.5 feet wide, is to be left empty all around it. Andy Christophides in the house. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. We are about to finish off Ezekiel and enter the book of Daniel, arguably the most Jesus-centered book in all the Bible. I'm glad you're here, Andy Christophides. Let's do this. And apparently your goalkeeper, Pope, is going to get Golden Gloves of the season, so well done to him. Within the larger sacred area, measure out a portion of land 8 1/3 miles long and 3 1/3 miles long. Within it, the sanctuary of the most holy place will be located. This area will be holy, set aside for the priests who minister to the Lord in the sanctuary. They will use it for their homes, and my temple will be located within it. The strip of sacred land next to it, also 8 1/3 miles long and 3 1/3 miles wide, will be a living area for the Levites who work at the temple. It will be their possession and a place for their towns. Adjacent to the larger sacred area will be a section of land 8 1/3 miles long and 1 2/3 miles wide. This will be set aside for a city where anyone in Israel can live. Can somebody please screenshot Andy Christophides saying, "Yeah, the Pope," and blast it to the South Wales Echo? 2 special sections of land will be set apart for the prince. One section will share a border with the east side of the sacred lands and city, and the second section will share a border on the west side. Then the far eastern and western borders of the prince's land will line up with the eastern and western boundaries of the tribal areas. These sections of land will be the prince's allotment. Then my princes will no longer oppress and rob my people. They will assign the rest of the land to the people, given an allotment to each tribe. Ladies and gentlemen, how is it that even the Levitical priesthood went down the Swanee and started worshipping idols and leading the church to do that? Where does that take a foothold in church life? And how does it not have the brakes put on it? Fascinating stuff in the book of Ezekiel. For this is what the sovereign Lord says: "Enough, you princes of Israel. Stop your violence and oppression and do what is just and right. Quit robbing and cheating my people out of their land. Stop expelling them from their homes, says the sovereign Lord. Use only honest weights and scales and honest measures, both dry and liquid." The homer will be your standard unit for measuring volume. The ephah and the bath will each measure 1/10 of a homer measure. 1/10 of a homer. The standard unit for weight will be the silver shekel. 1 shekel will consist of 20 gerahs, and 60 shekels will be equal to 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are a church member, you should not be cheating people, even in selling objects or weighing goods. Let your faith work itself out in good deeds. You must give this tax to the prince: 1 bushel of wheat or barley for every 60 you harvest, 1% of your olive oil, and 1 sheep or goat for every 200 in your flocks in Israel. These will be the grain offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings that will make atonement for the people who bring them, says the sovereign Lord. All the people of Israel must join in bringing these offerings to the prince. The prince will be required to provide offerings that are given at the religious festivals, the new moon celebrations, the Sabbath days, and all similar occasions. He will provide the sin offerings, burnt offerings, grain offerings, liquid offerings, and peace offerings to purify the people of Israel, making them right with the Lord. All of those offerings, Jesus-centered, gospel pictures. He makes us right. This is what the sovereign Lord says. In early spring, on the first day of each new year, sacrifice a young bull with no defects to purify the temple. The priests will take blood from this sin offering and put it on the doorposts of the temple, the four corners of the upper ledge of the altar, and the gateposts and the entrance to the inner courtyard. Do this also on the 7th day of the new year, for everyone who has sinned through error and ignorance. In this way, you will purify the temple. You got to even spring clean furniture. The Lord is so holy. On the 14th day of the first month, you must celebrate Passover. This festival will last for 7 days. The bread you eat during that time must be made without yeast. On the day of Passover, the prince will provide a young bull as a sin offering for himself and the people of Israel. On each of the 7 days of the feast, he will prepare a burnt offering to the Lord consisting of 7 young bulls and 7 rams without defects. A male goat will also be given each day for a sin offering. The prince will provide a basket of flour as a grain offering and a gallon of olive oil with each young bull and ram. During the 7 days of the festival of shelters, Owen's favourite festival by the way, which occurs every year in early autumn, the prince will provide these same sacrifices for the sin offering and burnt offering and the grain offering, along with the required olive oil. I would like to put it to vote in Bible Hour. Should Owen redo the Feast of Shelters in the Park End car park now that we're back having meetings in the car park? Would that be a good idea? Ladies and gentlemen, we are 2 chapters away. What a rich ride it has been for the Lord to sort out his ancient church, Israel, in captivity of all places. This is what the Sovereign Lord says: the east gateway of the inner courtyard will be closed during the 6 work days of each week, but it will be open on Sabbath days and the days of new moon celebrations. The prince will enter the entry room of the gateway from the outside. Then he will stand by the gatepost while the priest offers his burnt offering and peace offering. He will bow down in worship inside the gateway passage and then go back out the way he came. The gateway will not be closed until evening. The common people will bow down and worship the Lord in front of this gateway on Sabbath days and the days of new moon celebrations. Each Sabbath day the prince will present to the Lord a burnt offering of 6 lambs and 1 ram, all without no defects, and we know why there should be no defects. He will present a grain offering of a basket of choice flour to go with the ram and whatever amount of flour he chooses to go with each lamb, and he is to offer 1 gallon of olive oil for each basket of flour. At the new moon celebrations he will bring 1 young bull, 6 lambs, 1 young ram, all with no defects. With the young bull he must bring a basket of choice flour for a grain offering. With the ram he must bring another basket of flour. And with each lamb he is to bring whatever amount of flour he chooses to give. With each basket of flour he must offer 1 gallon of olive oil. Well, I see literally no one in chat took my suggestion of doing the Feast of Tabernacles in the car park seriously, because no one replied. Diane Robbins, you're usually all over things like Feast of Tabernacles. Where were you? The prince must enter the gateway through the entry room, and he must leave the same way. And when they enter the gateway through the entry room, he must leave the same way. But when the people come in through the north gateway to worship the Lord during religious festivals, they must leave by the south gateway. And those who entered through the south gateway must leave by the north gateway. They must never leave by the same gateway they came in, but must always use the opposite gateway. The prince will enter and leave with the people on these occasions. So at the special feasts and sacred festivals, the grain offering will be a basket of choice flour with each young bull, another basket of flour with each ram, as much flour as the worshipper chooses to give with each lamb. Give 1 gallon of olive oil with each basket of flour, When the prince offers a voluntary burnt offering or peace offering to the Lord, the east gateway to the inner court will be opened for him, and he will offer his sacrifices as he does on Sabbath days. Then he will leave, and the gateway will be shut behind him. Each morning you must sacrifice a 1-year-old lamb with no defects as a burnt offering through the Lord. With the lamb, a grain offering must also be given to the Lord, about 3 quarts of flour with 1/3 of a gallon of olive oil to moisten the choice flour. This will be a permanent law for you. The lamb, the grain offering, and the olive oil must be given as a daily sacrifice every morning without fail. Petit bois. What are the new moon? The new moon festivals in Ezekiel 26, we'll see it in Haggai, I think, as well. It's when the ancient church, or the leaders, waited for instruction and visions from the Lord Yahweh. I think that's probably it in a nutshell. Of course, they went off a lunar-based calendar. So, month is like new moon. I think it's the same word. The Hebrew word for month literally means new moon. And back in Numbers 28, on the first of every month, present to the Lord a burnt offering. So it's like monthly times of celebration and worship, particularly of the leaders. I think that's where you could go with it. What a fast read. Well done, Owen. No distractions tonight. Each morning you must sacrifice a 1-year-old lamb with no defects as a burnt offering to the Lord. With the lamb, a grain offering must also be given to the Lord, about 3 quarts of flour with 1/3 of a gallon of olive oil to moisten the choice flour. This will be a permanent law for you. The lamb, the grain offering, and the olive oil must be given as a daily sacrifice every morning without fail. Diane Robbins, I'm absolutely on board with the Feast of Shelters, and someone who works for Huggard, how could I not be? Chris Henry, I'm pretty sure you asked us that before the festival or 80 or so days ago, and we all said yes, I think. When we were young and fresh and energetic, we had aspirations in life. This is what the Sovereign Law says. If the prince gives a gift of land to the one of his sons as his inheritance, it will belong to him and his descendants forever. But if the prince gives a gift of land from his inheritance to one of his servants, the servant may keep it only until the year of Jubilee, which comes every 50th year. At that time the land will return to its prince. But when the prince gives gifts to his sons, those gifts will be permanent, and the prince may never take anyone's property by force. If he gives property to his sons, it must be from his own land, for I do not want any of my people unjustly evicted from their property. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just had like an ominous feeling as we've reached the 5th, or the 4th, possibly the 3rd. I know what's going to happen. We're going to finish Ezekiel, and it's going to be so close to the end. I'm going to talk myself out of starting Daniel so we can properly start it tomorrow. Which means I'm guilty on 2 accounts. Number 1, I wrote in the Park End newsletter last week that we were starting Daniel this week, and I've only made it by 1 day if we start it tomorrow. And I put on social media today that we're starting Daniel, and we're probably not. In my vision, the man brought me through the entrance beside the gateway and led me to the sacred room assigned to the priests, which faced towards the north. He showed me a place at the extreme west end of these rooms. He explained, this is where the priests will cook the meat from the guilt offerings and sin offerings and bake the flour from the grain offerings into the bread. They will do it here to avoid carrying the sacrifices through the outer courtyard and endangering the people by transmitting holiness to them. Then he brought me back to the outer courtyard and led me to each of the four corners. In each corner I saw an enclosure. Each of these enclosures was 70 feet long and 52.5 feet wide, surrounded by walls. Along with inside of these walls was a ledge of stone with fireplaces under the ledge all the way round. The man said to me, "These are the kitchens to be used by the temple assistants to boil the sacrifices offered by the people." Are we even going to finish Ezekiel? Ladies and gentlemen, Ezekiel 47 is one of my favourite chapters in the Bible. The river of healing. Oh no, it's not. Yeah, no, it sort of is, yeah. In my vision, the man brought me back to the entrance of the temple. There I saw a stream flowing east from beneath the door of the temple and passing to the right of the altar on its south side. That's all right, Sue Roberts. I like people butting in, man. I'm all about engaging with these modern youths and their whack job ideas that Jesus isn't really divine. Those crazy youngsters, what will they think of next? Anyway, remember now as we're reading this river whose streams make glad the city of God, Psalm 46, 48. Yeah, 46. And remember Jesus who gives streams of living water. Out from me springs streams of living water. Remember that now. Because now there is this stream in the city of God. Check this out. There I could see the water flowing out through the south side of the east gateway. Measuring as he went, he took me along the stream for 1,750 feet, and then he led me across. The water was up to my ankles. He measured off another 1,750 feet and led me across again. This time the water was up to my knees. After another 1,750, I can't even get numbers right now, I'm panicking. It was up to my waist. Then he measured another 1,750 feet, and the measure was too deep. The river was too deep to walk across. It was deep enough to swim in, but too deep to walk through. Ladies and gentlemen, do you pray for revival, streams of refreshing water so deep that we are swimming in the Lord's presence, because that's what the Holy Spirit is doing here. He asked me, "Have you been watching, Son of Man?" Then he led me back to the riverbank. When I returned, I was surprised by the sight of many trees growing on both sides of the river. Then he said to me, "This river flows east through the desert into the valley of the Dead Sea. The waters of this stream will make the salty waters of the Dead Sea fresh and pure. There will be swarms of living things wherever the water of this river flows." So pictures of Revelation Psalm 1 here. Fish will abound in the Dead Sea, for its waters will become fresh. Life will flourish wherever this water flows. Fishermen will stand along the shores of the Dead Sea, all the way from the En Gedi to the En Aglaim. The shores will be covered with nets, drying in the sun. Fish of every kind will fill the Dead Sea, just as they fill the Mediterranean. But the marshes and swamps will not be purified. They will still be salty. Fruit trees of all kind will grow along both sides of the river. The leaves of these trees will never turn brown and fall, and there will always be fruit on their branches. There will be a new crop every month, for they are watered by the river flowing from the temple. The fruit will be food and leaves for healing. Jesus is causing church to prosper again. This is what the sovereign Lord says: divide the land in this way for the 12 tribes of Israel. The descendants of Joseph will be given 2 shares of land. Otherwise, each tribe will receive an equal share. I took a solemn oath and swore that I would give this land to your ancestors, and it will now come to you as your possession. This is incredible, moving stuff. Church is back. These are the boundaries of the land. The northern border will run from the Mediterranean toward Hethlon, then through Lebon Hamath to Zedad. Then it will run to Berelthath and Sibraim, which are on the border between Damascus and Hamath, and finally to Hazar Hittikon and the border of Huran. So the northern border will run from the Mediterranean to Hazar Enan, on the border between Hamath to the north and Damascus to the south. The eastern border starts at a point between Huran and Damascus and runs south along the Jordan River between Israel and many trees growing on both sides of the river. Then he said to me, this river flows east through the desert into the valley of the Dead Sea. The waters of this stream will make the salty waters of the Dead Sea fresh and pure. There will be streams of living things wherever the water of this river flows. Fish will abound in the Dead Sea, for its waters will become fresh. Life will flourish wherever this water flows. Fishermen will stand along the shores of the Dead Sea, all the way from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim. The shores will be covered with nets drying in the sun. Fish of every kind will fill the Dead Sea, just as they fill the Mediterranean. But the marshes and swamps will not be purified, they will be salty. Fruits of all kinds will grow along both sides of the river. The leaves of these trees will never turn brown and fall, and there will always be fruit on their branches. Hold on a minute. There will be a new crop every month, for they are watered. Hold on a minute. What am I doing? What am I doing? I just read the page before, twice. I read the page before twice, at the worst possible time. When I'm on a time limit to close off Ezekiel, I clicked up instead of down, and I reread the page again. Ladies and gentlemen, I have failed you. And I'm still not reading. What are you doing here, Owen? Get a grip. Verse 18. The eastern border... Then the eastern border starts at a point between Huran and Damascus and runs south along the Jordan River between Israel and Gilead past the Dead Sea. And where was the park end admin on that one? Past the Dead Sea as far south as Tamar. This will be the eastern border. The southern border will go west from Tamar to the waters of Meribah and Kadesh, and then follow the course of the brook of Egypt to the Mediterranean. This will be the southern border. On the west side, the Mediterranean itself will be your border from the southern border to the point where the northern border begins opposite Lebo Hamath. Divide the land within these boundaries among the tribes of Israel. Now wait. Just picture how sinful you've been. You've been sent to Babylon, and yet there is still a promise of land for you. Is that your story? Distribute the land as an allotment for yourselves, for the foreigners who have joined you and are raising their families among you. They will be like native-born Israelites to you and will receive an allotment. Even the foreigners are coming in among the tribes. These foreigners are to be given land within the territory of the tribe with whom they now live. I, the sovereign Lord, have spoken. Diane, losing the will to live. Chris Henry, this man needs a holiday. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just do it. I'm going to read 35 chapters of Ezekiel 48, and you could stay or go. Division of the land. We'll end on this special note of church being allocated the promised land again, which is our story in Jesus. Here is the list of the tribes of Israel. Its names. Tribes of Israel and the territory each is to receive. The territory of Dan is in the extreme north. Its boundary line follows the Hethlon road to Lebo Hamath, and then runs onto Hazain onto the border of Damascus with Hamath to the north. Dan's territory extends all the way across the land of Israel from east to west. Asher's territory, did I say 35 chapters? Asher's territory lies south of Dan's and also extends from east to west. Naphtali's land lies south of Asher's, also extending from east to... I thought I read the same line twice then, but I didn't. Then comes Manasseh south of Naphtali, and its territory also extends from east to west. South of Manasseh, Ephraim, and then Reuben, and then Judah, and all whose boundaries extend from east to west. South of Judah is the land set aside for a special purpose, and it will be 8 1/3 miles wide and will extend as far east and west as the tribal territories, with the temple at the center. The area set aside for the Lord's temple will be 8 1/3 miles long and 6 2/3 miles wide for the priests. That's massive. The priests, there will be a strip of land measuring 8 1/3 miles long and 3 1/3 miles wide, with the Lord's temple at the center. This area is, I want Park End to be the center of life in Cardiff. This area is set aside for the ordained priests, the descendants of Zadok, who served me faithfully and did not go astray with the people of Israel and the rest of the Levites. It will be their special portion when the land is distributed, the most sacred land of all. Next to the priest's territory will lie the land where the other Levites will live. And I ain't going to stop, ladies and gentlemen, unless the Lord kills me, to minister and feed Park End church members with Jesus, and then make sure everybody else in Cardiff hears the name of Jesus, at least in our area, from Park End Church. I'm not going to rest until I'm forced to for 2 weeks by the elders, which has just happened. But I'm doing it afterwards. The land allotted to the Levites will be the same size and shape as that belonging to the priests, 8 1/3 miles long and 3 1/3 miles wide. Together these portions of land will measure 8 1/3 miles long and 6 2/3 miles wide. None of this special land may ever be sold or traded by others, for it belongs to the Lord. It is set apart as holy. An additional strip of land is 8 1/3 miles long and 1 2/3 miles wide. South of the sacred temple area will be allotted for public use. Homes, your home. Pasture lands, common lands. With a city at the centre, the city will measure 1.5 miles on each side, north, south, east and west. Open lands will surround the city for 150 yards in every direction. Outside the city there will be a farming area that stretches 3 1/3 miles to the east and 3 1/3 miles to the west, along with the border of the sacred area. This farmland will produce food for the people working in the city. Those who come from the various tribes to work in the city may farm it. This entire area, including the sacred lands in the city, is a square that measures 8 1/3 miles on each side. The areas that remain to the east and to the west of the sacred lands in the city will belong to the prince. Each of these areas will be 8 1/3 miles wide, extending in opposite directions to the eastern and western borders of Israel, with the sacred lands and the sanctuary of the temple at the center. So the prince's land will include everything between the territories allotted to Judah and Benjamin, except for the areas set aside for the sacred lands and the city. These are the territories allotted to the rest of the tribes. Benjamin's territory lies just south of the prince's land, and it extends across the entire land of Israel from east to west. South of Benjamin territories lies that of Simeon, also extended from the land from east to west. Next is the territory of Issachar, and the same eastern to western boundaries. Then comes the territory of Zebulun, which also extends across the land from east to west. The territory of Gad is just south of Zebulun, with the same borders in the east and west. The southern border of Gad runs from Tamar and the waters of Meribah to Kadesh, and then follows the brook of Egypt to the Mediterranean. These are the allotments that will be set aside for each tribe's exclusive possession. I, the sovereign Lord, have spoken. These will be the exits to the city. On the north wall, which is 1.5 miles long, there will be 3 gates, each one named after the tribe of Israel. The first will be named for Reuben, the second for Judah, the third for Levi. On the east wall, 1.5 miles long, the gates will be named for Joseph, Benjamin, Dan. On the south wall, from also 1.5 miles long, will have gates named for Simeon, Issachar, and Zebulun. And on the west wall, 1.5 miles long, the gates will be named for Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. The distance around the entire city will be 6 miles. And from that day, the name of the city will be The Lord is There. Yahweh Shammah. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. And we will be back tomorrow for the book of Daniel. Church is back with its allotted land. Hallelujah. What a Saviour.